Hello, everybody. This is Evan, founder and CEO of Gentatech, and we are back again with another high level overview. So, we are an MSP, a managed service provider, and today's high level overview, we're actually going to look at exactly what an MSP even is. What does an MSP do? What does it mean? How do they deliver services? So on and so forth. Now, this is a high level overview that will apply to essentially every MSP out there. Most of the things that you see or will see in this video, most MSPs will handle. Now, the methodology, the thoroughness, the commitment to different softwares to get these things done, obviously the pricing, all of these things will differ. But for the most part, what you're going to see in this video will reveal to you exactly what it's like to be a client on the receiving end of some type of MSP service. First and foremost, let's go ahead and take a peek at these two office setups here. And what we're going to do is look at these very common office setups. These are very common situations that MSP will walk into. Perhaps this is your office situation if you're a business owner. If you're an employee, perhaps you've worked in an office like one of these offices we're about to review here. And then we'll see some common problems with these two office setups. And then we'll see how an MSP solves a lot of these problems here. All right, so office number one, up top here, we have employee number one. We have employee number two. So employee number one has some hardware and some software that they utilize to get the job done, as is employee number two. So maybe they have, use Adobe for PDFs. Let's say they use Microsoft Outlook for something like email. Let's say that they have some video editing responsibilities in their job position. So they can use one of Apple's products to get that done. Let's say perhaps there's only a PC at the office, for example. So they use a PC. And let's say they have a personal phone, a personal Android phone. Likewise, employee number two, maybe they're using some Adobe products as well for PDF editing, things of that nature. Perhaps they're using Gmail, for example. Maybe they're using Adobe versus Apple to go ahead and get their video editing done. And then maybe they don't work at the office, but they have a personal Mac at their house that they work off of. Perhaps a remote. Then here we have an iPhone as well. So the company, of course, has goals, and the company has tasks for these people to do. And this office setup here, there will be no real cohesiveness. People will come into the office with their own devices. Perhaps they'll work on a device that's in the office. Perhaps these company resources are being stored on maybe, Google Drives that are of the employees' profiles themselves. So they're not even being stored on a company profile. And this is very, very, very common. And what this can look like, for example, is let's say we have, a manager, a lead, whoever it may be. And employee number one has a task of editing some video, sending that off to employee number two for that video to be reviewed and approved before that's then sent off to management. So what can happen here is employee number one can use their machine at the office here or the local machine, laptop, whatever it may be, and then they'll have to check their email to get the content. Hopefully the content came from whoever it's supposed to come from. They'll pull that content out, throw it in one of the Apple products, go ahead and get to editing that information, that video, and then they'll jump on their Android and they'll text that all the way over to employee number two. Employee number two is going to have to hope that he can open whatever's been sent to him in his particular software, so on and so forth, and then they'll package that up, send it all the way to management, and then hopefully that will get approved. I have a feeling that people have worked under conditions like that before, where there's really no central location for any of this information to sit. There's no permissions. Everybody kind of has access to everything through email only. There's really no employee accounts, things of that nature. Office number two is a little bit better. They have a little bit more cohesiveness because in this particular situation, perhaps all the company resources are located on maybe one of a company Google Drive, perhaps SharePoint instead, maybe OneDrive. They're storing and sharing files in some way, shape, or form. But as we can see, employee number one from Office 1 and employee number one from Office number 2, they have the exact same setup concerning the devices that they have. So maybe they work on a device when they're at the office occasionally. Everything else is owned by themselves. They're signed in to their personal profile. They're just kind of waiting on emails and storing information on their own personal laptops or computers and reaching that information or depositing that information into a company Google Drive when it's done. And then employee number 2 can go ahead and hop in that Google Drive, receive that information, download it, work on it, edit it, and then pass it back into the Google Drive. Obviously, this is a little bit better than Office number 1, but this still has some major issues concerning the granular control that the company has over the data, the security of the data, where the data is going to go, the consistency of the data concerning both of these employees being able to work on it, making sure that it can fit in the same software. So none of those problems are really solved. So what an MSP does is they come and clean all of this up. They turn all of this into a big system that works like clockwork, and they do this from an IT perspective. So let's take a peek at exactly what that looks like. All right, so as we can see here, we have the managed service provider at the top, which will serve as the company. And then we have what we're looking at here, to keep in mind, is the exact same thing that we were looking at in Office number 1 and 2, but we're breaking this down into a service and then viewing how a managed service provider is going to come and clean these things up. So the first thing a managed service provider is going to do is talk to you about your business goals. These have nothing to do with software or hardware or anything like that. They just want to understand your business goals. And these goals could be simple. Right? Are you looking to grow in terms of bringing employees on? Your plan for employee retention. Are you looking to perhaps grow offices, expand in another state? Are you looking to eventually be able to have your employees work remote? Things of that nature. Just flat out business goals. And what the MSP is going to do is then translate those business goals into some basic employee needs. So for example, according to your business goals, perhaps your employees need a way to communicate with each other safely, right? Or perhaps they need maybe keycard access to a building, and maybe you need to be able to keep track who goes in and out of the building. For example, maybe we need to share content or access company resources in one central place. Maybe you as a business owner want to use this one central place for different types of content that can't be accessed by different types of people. So for example, maybe you have a CFO that has some business documents that he needs to access, but you don't want, your graphic design intern to access those business documents, obviously. Maybe you need a solution like that. Or perhaps you have an office with multiple rooms, and you need to make sure that each one of those rooms has a nice, strong Wi-Fi signal, or maybe even separate Wi-Fi networks, things of that nature. So after your employee needs are figured out, which are going to come from your business goals, then we're going to be able to look at the software that's needed to make this stuff happen, right? So the MSP is going to consult with you, and based on your employee needs, they're going to recommend some software or look at the software that you're currently using and see how that can be optimized. Now, this can be anything under the sun, and this really depends on the goals. We're looking at stuff like, perhaps you need a server so you can look at Linux, or maybe you need some Adobe Suite gear. Maybe you need a VoIP for a very detailed phone system, a nice secure email system. Maybe you need to run some type of other web server for documentation or something like that. Maybe you need some protected web browsing. Maybe you need everybody to have access to the web, but you need to make sure that the devices are safe, not at a threat to get any malware. Maybe you need cloud storage, right? A merchant account for PayPal, something of that nature. Now, these particular pieces of software here, no means exhaustive. This list is not exhaustive at all. To be quite honest, just some of the logos, common logos that are in this software particularly, so that's why we put them up here. But regardless, the MSP is going to be able to identify what software you need based on your employee needs. Now, based on your employee needs, based on the software that's needed to bring that information to life, to bring that system to life, we now can identify some of the hardware. For example, maybe the company just needs one simple file server, or maybe they need a whole server rack with different servers to serve different purposes. Maybe they want to save money on hardware, you can bounce back over here, and they want to virtualize some servers. Maybe they need some phones for a VoIP system. Maybe they need multiple workstations and PCs spread across their office, or sent off to their employees that want to work from home if they want to work remote. Maybe they need routing capabilities to be able to segregate networks and make sure that the accounting department can't get information from, the C-suite, or make sure your intern department can't get information from the accounting department, so on and so forth. Or, maybe they just need a nice big hub to be able to connect everything via Ethernet, so we can make sure that we have a very secure, fast, and stable internet connection. Whatever the need, hardware will be identified based on the business goals, the employee needs, and the software that's going to be used, right? We need to make sure that a lot of the software can run on the particular hardware and make sure the hardware is strong enough to support the software, so on and so forth. Moving forward, now we have licensing. Okay, well, software, most of it is not free. Some of it is. Some impactful software is free. Looking at you, Linux. But licensing is a big thing, right? Maybe you need Microsoft 365, or maybe you need some type of Google licensing, or Adobe Suites, or some VoIP service. And what an MSP is going to do, and depending on how they go about their business, well, I won't say that. Some MSPs have the ability to create relationships with vendors and get you a discount on some of this licensing, but every MSP should at minimum be handling your licensing for you. Um, Making sure everything is registered properly, making sure all of your licenses are going to the correct users, which will be the employees of your company, making sure things aren't expired, keeping you up to date with the renewal schedule, making sure the license are proper, right? Perhaps you yourself are not very savvy with software, so you go to try to get Microsoft licensing thinking it's going to do one thing, when in reality it really does another. So after your employee needs the software and the hardware, the actual licensing to bring this stuff to life, and quick pause here, some of your hardware itself even needs to be licensed, right? So whatever it is will be held under this licensing umbrella, and the MSP should handle that for you. Now we move on to installation and configuration. All of this stuff here is going to need to be set up. This is usually done in the aspect of what some people will call a project. So they have individual projects, maybe onboarding fees, depending on how they run their business. But nonetheless, all of this hardware purchased, rented, upgraded, whatever it may be, all of the licensing for the relevant software and hardware, it's going to need to be set up. So maybe the MSP will come and set up, for example, a nice file server or a rack of file servers, and make sure every computer within your local office has access to that file server. Could be something like that. Maybe you want to get a little bit more advanced and set up Active Directory, where groups of different users and users themselves are being authenticated all in one area, and you can really manage the different permissions, what they have access to, track who's logging on, right? Or maybe we need some type of firewall set up, right? You got a modem here, firewall here, and then connect it to the devices on site. Whatever it may be, the MSP's job is going to be to install and configure everything that they consult over. Most of the time. Now, some MSPs may not do certain things or specific things. I know some MSPs are not very well versed, for example, in Apple products, so maybe they're not going to, come through and configure all your Mac devices for you. But in general, whatever you consult over, your employee needs, the software needed, the relevant hardware needed, the licensing, and the installation and configuration should all be handled by the MSP themselves. Now, we move over here. So now we move into the IT part of things. So all this stuff happens before the IT management and help desk comes in. But after the MSP finds your employee needs software, hardware, licensing, installs, and configures, they then will take a position of performing as your in-house IT team. So they'll be managing all of this stuff. They'll be managing all of your hardware, keeping your firmware up to date, making sure that things are up and running, monitoring things. They should be controlling all of this software as far as updating the software, making sure the software is working with the hardware. They should be keeping up to date with your licensing, like we said. They should be keeping up to date with the infrastructure that they installed and configured. And more importantly, they are a source via help desk, right? So most MSPs offer a help desk service to where you can reach out to them just like you've reached out to tech support before. But now your company has your own personal tech support team that's an expert in your specific infrastructure and stack because they helped you build it, of course. So your employees or yourself should be able to reach out to your MSP via some type of help desk or help desk service, and then get information and help, doing things like maybe changing a password, or perhaps you lost access or lost a username, maybe something's not working right, whatever it may be. All of that needs to be handled and should be handled by your MSP. Now let's talk about security. So cybersecurity is booming. MSPs have been around a lot longer than cybersecurity has been in the public eye. And I want to be careful of how I say that here. Not MSPs haven't been around necessarily longer than cybersecurity, but cybersecurity booming is a fairly new thing. What you can find is some MSPs, there's no telling what the percentage is. Not only do they not provide any security services, they oftentimes will neglect security. It just won't be in their realm or scope of what they do. And if we look here, we look at business goals, employee needs, software needed, hardware needed, licensing, and installation configuration, and even the management and help desk. All of this can be provided in a very unsecure manner, or without security even being a focus or a need at all. So there is no guarantee that an MSP is going to provide a secure service or focus on security. If you're shopping around for an MSP, you're going to want to make sure that you get some clarification on that, because it's something that you definitely need. And then sometimes MSPs that really focus on security, they call themselves a managed security service provider, MSSP. That's one thing that you can hear as well. But in general, this is the whole flow of what an MSP company is going to do. So again, you have your personal and your personal business needs and business goals, and maybe that's a corporation, so it's more than one person. And the MSP is going to come in and really organize every piece of software, hardware, and relevant installation and configuration needs, and do everything for you and take it all off of your hands. And then after that's all done, again, they're going to take a position as your in-house IT department, usually through some type of help desk. So that is the basic explanation of exactly what an MSP is. Pretty long video, but at the same time, it's important to be able to understand these things, especially when you are on a receiving end of it or positioning yourself to prepare to garner these services. Oh, and one last thing here, MSPs will usually charge either per user or per device. So, that can really fluctuate depending on your area. But if you do have any questions about the structure of MSPs, your MSP, what they're providing, what they're not providing, do not hesitate to reach out to us at info@gentatech.com. And I just need to reiterate this as well. MSPs are individual businesses themselves. There is no governing body, so that means that they provide services how they see fit. Everybody has a different style. Everybody has a different methodology. Everybody has different things that they consider important, things that they may overlook, so on and so forth. But if you made it to the end of this video, you should have a really, really good idea on exactly what MSP is, what they do, and how they function. And we appreciate you watching. See you next time.